Open.
All right, we're back in session, 10 o'clock public hearing. It is 10:02. Planning and zoning, item 3.1, conduct a public hearing to consider taking the following actions concerning planning file P17-46 Wood regarding APN 008-130-10 in the Sawyer area. Number 1, adopt a mitigated negative declaration finding on the basis of the whole record before the board, including the initial study and comments received, that there is no substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment and that the mitigated negative deck reflects the board's independent judgment analysis. And introduce, waive the reading of and enact an ordinance amending Trinity County zoning ordinance 315 by rezoning APN 008-130-01 from unclassified to agriculture 40-acre minimum size, and approve the use permit to authorize the establishment and operation of a 6 guest room, bed and breakfast facility, small conference room, employee housing, 2 outdoor kitchens, and an agricultural building, finding the action be consistent with the overall goals and policies of the Trinity County Planning General Plan. Trinity County Planning Commission recommended approval. Fiscal impact unknown. Listen.
Good morning. Like you just said, we are asking you to adopt the mitigated neg deck as attached and waive the reading of and enact the ordinance that amends the zoning ordinance to change the parcel from unclassified to ag, 40-acre minimum. So the applicant is not present here today, nor is their agent. They were present at the Planning Commission meeting when this item appeared. The Planning Commission approved it unanimously. Currently, the uses in this area to the north are TPZ, and to the south it is also TPZ. They have a number of buildings that are currently on site, but they are looking at eventually doing a build out to add additional buildings so that they can do their bed and breakfast and have a conference room facility. They have conditions of approval associated with their use permit, so any of those buildings that would be developed would need to get the necessary permits and get clearance before they were allowed to use them associated with the bed and breakfast. So do you have any questions? No, sir.
Okay, we'll open it up to the public. Any public comment on item 3.1?
Jake Grossman, Chris Hayforth. A number of questions. Really excited to hear that somebody's getting an ag building. That's cool. I didn't know that we did those in Trinity County. They must not be producing cannabis. I'm also curious how this CUP, this rezone, all of this has been done so efficiently by the time frame that this was submitted and put in. My wife's CUP should have been heard in June. From everything that I hear about this, I don't know the owners of this property. I don't know anything about it except for what you guys have put out. But this sounds like a pot farm. Employee housing, outdoor kitchens, ag buildings, conference rooms. Sounds like a perfect pot farm. Now, I know a number of people in this room, including one of our esteemed supervisors, that's been trying to deal with CUPs, rezones, building modifications, ag buildings, all of these things, that is still just getting stonewalled. I'm not here to try to interrupt a business in Sawyer by any means. I just want us all to take a serious look in the mirror at, wow, a business that doesn't have a cannabis leaf stamped on it just went through the exact same process that so many of us are struggling to go through in a very short period of time, with a unanimous vote from planning, with the staff approval on it, for quite frankly, if you were to put this description we just heard in a real estate ad and maybe say 10,000 square foot garden, you would have a phenomenal turnkey cannabis business. But this went through like that. None of ours had. We can't even get a report on the CUPs from Rick Tippett that was requested from the board.
Any other public comment? All right, with that, we'll bring it back to the board. Any further questions for Leslie? Entertain a motion.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the planning.
Go ahead and we'll do this at
3.1.
We'll do this in two sections. We'll do the negative deck first. So go ahead and just read that number one.
Okay, I make a motion to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, finding that on the basis of the whole record before the board, including the initial study and comments received, that there's no substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment, and that the mitigated negative declaration reflects the board's independent judgment and analysis. And
I'll second that.
Oh, never mind.
Go ahead.
Ms. Chadwick, we'll give it to Ms. Chadwick.
Supervisor Chadwick?
Aye.
Supervisor Myers?
Aye.
Supervisor Morris?
Yes.
Supervisor Bentley?
Aye.
Supervisor Rose?
Aye. Okay. So the other part, just,
Okay, I make
Yes.
another motion to adopt 3.1, item number 2, to introduce and waive the reading and enact the ordinance amending Trinity County's ordinance number 315 by rezoning APN 008-130-01 from unclassified to agriculture. 40-acre minimum lot size, and approve a use permit to authorize the establishment and operation of a 6-guest bedroom and breakfast facility, small conference room, employee housing, 2 outdoor kitchens, and an agricultural building, finding the action to be consistent with the overall goals and policies of the Trinity County General Plan.
Second. Was a separate motion, was it not?
yes, that was the second
Second.
motion.
Supervisor Morris?
Yes.
Supervisor Myers?
Yes.
Supervisor Chadwick?
Aye.
Supervisor Bentley?
Yes.
Supervisor Rose?
Aye. All right, on to county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters that are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request an item be heard out of order. I am going to flop the orders because 5.1 may take a little longer, and we'll want to get our human resources people out of here. So we're going to do 5.2 first. So with that, 5.2, approve the modified title change for job descriptions for the Sheriff's Department, Jail Division, following positions: Correctional Officer 1, 2, and 3, and Correctional Sergeant, to the new titles Correctional Deputy Sheriff Dispatcher 1, 2, or 3, and Correctional Deputy Sheriff Sergeant, and modify the allocation list for the Sheriff's Department, Jail Division by replacing said titles effective August 1st, 2018, and direct that said changes be made to the allocation listing.
Jillie's not here today, so she has it. I go ahead and take this, and then we have a sheriff's staff here that can answer questions regarding the changes. Essentially, it is a title change. In theory, it allows better use of staff. It allows for situations like we just had. If we need additional officers on the street, that they will be able to actually go out on the street, because they'll be deputies as opposed to COs, where COs have powers of arrest. And I'll let you explain that. 832 a little better than I can, but they have more authority than just jail duties.
Okay.
Yes. So, Ryan Lynn, Joe Commander. I became aware as taking over the facility about 8 months ago that the staff was actually out of line with, out of step with the state of California as far as the penal codes and the BSCC codes, Board of State Community Corrections. So therefore, I submitted a paper to the CAO and the sheriff stating these deficiencies and that they need to be corrected. Basically, the only thing we're asking for is basically a recognition of something that already happened in 2013, where several counties went to correctional deputy versus correctional officer. There's a movement away from the correctional officer to correctional deputy in the state of California because they like some more. They like to define it better in the penal code. So therefore, I submitted this and helped HR correct some of the job titles, which were submitted to you beforehand. If there's any questions, I can address.
Okay.
I do have one quick question.
Okay.
So when it comes to hiring, is it a higher threshold in terms of what the requirements is in terms of training?
No, ma'am, it's not. The requirements will be the same.
Okay.
The title will change basically for legal reasons, but we will still maintain the same level and same level of type of group we need now. Will be the same before in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, we'll open up to the public. Any questions from the public? All right, we'll come back and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. All right, item 5.1, discuss or take action to determine the wilderness ad hoc committees and Trinity County's position on Congressman Huffman's bill HR 6596, Northwest California Wilderness Recreation and Working Forest Act. So this is going to be this bill has been submitted with some minor changes from the original bill. Supervisor Finley and I had met with the congressman and other parts of his group to discuss this. He has requested us a letter of support. I don't know the feelings of the rest of the board on this item and where it came from, or not where it came from, but what they feel about what we should do here. I know there's large impacts in most everybody's district. Supervisor Mines has large impacts, so does Finley. I do, or actually I have less now, and Supervisor Chadwick has large impacts in her district. So this is meant to be a little more workshop-y than we normally do here. So I asked everybody to do their homework and read the act and come up with changes or thoughts that they had. And what I see the options today is, or in the future on this, is that we send no letter and stay neutral in the fact. We send a letter opposing it outright, and or we send a letter saying that we think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, or we send a letter saying we could support, but here are the 5 or 30 changes we'd like to see before we could give our full support. So with that, are there any questions from the board about what our process is going to be? We'll open up to the public first, and then we'll come back and have discussion here.
Are we getting any type of formal presentation from their staff?
We've had no, we are not. We've had presentation. The bill has been submitted.
But to the board today?
No, not today, no. Yes.
I've had requests from various constituents throughout District 5 who would like to see a little bit more input and notice of the meeting. Most of them found out about it on Friday, even though you did announce it 2 weeks ago that this would be coming up. So they have requested that no decision be made on this board's part, and that another workshop happen, maybe a special meeting, that type of thing. So
Okay.
that's a request.
I wouldn't be opposed to us taking input, bringing in, getting concepts, and then possibly you and I going on down county and doing a workshop. Is that?
Or if
a listening
if there's
tour?
money to do it, sure. Sounds like a great plan.
I would like a formal presentation to the board at some point.
I mean, we've had
I thought we had one from
Two.
John Driscoll.
we've had two.
To the board,
Yes.
officially?
Well, if John Driscoll is official, this is a pretty loosey-goosey group that there's.
Watch out, one of them's in the audience.
Oh,
That, I mean, there's not like an official team that's going to fly out from Washington and give
No, I
us.
just would like someone from their staff to be able to answer questions if any come up today.
Yeah, okay, I mean, the bill's here. We can look at that, we can discuss that about a workshop.
Thank
And
you
this-
for considering that.
And this has also, been publicly vetted in town and through the collaborative. There was a public shop. So it's, to me, it's our time for us to gather what the public thinks of this. And then as the elected officials, we can represent to Washington what we feel needs to be done. So any other questions?
I would also like to request that we have public workshops. That's been the most consistent thing I have heard. It is it's pretty long, and I did not find a map. I think that there are more questions than that, and the opinions of the constituents need to be heard before any final. So I concur, we need workshops.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, with that, we'll open up to the public and take comments on.
Map.
That's actually not the newest one.
Well, it's not, but it was the only one that was on the site.
But it's close enough.
Close enough, thank you. Diana Sheen, Weaverville.
Diana, before you start, I will point out to the board that's looking at this map, the zones along north end of Trinity Lake, that is no longer brown, and the little brown zones on the Trinity Lake side that are against the wilderness are no longer in. Besides that, the map will be the same.
Red, brown.
Yeah, the dark red-brown represents the wilderness, and the one just on the north end of Bonanza King has been taken out, and their little buffer ones along, which are hard to see from here, are taken out. Everything else is exactly the same. Thank you for bringing them out, Ms. Sheen.
You're welcome. So I'm here to give you the informal public opinion from, as taken over at the Trinity County Fair. And I also had already presented these to the collaborative on Friday. And anyway, can I give this to Tina?
Yes, please.
So this is not good for our county, and I would like to say to you not to give a letter of support, and I will confer to Kay and possibly John. Thank you.
Kate Graves from Lewiston. This is, once again, we have people with their self-interest forcing it on others. And I don't know, I know that I see a few here today that have come in for this, but we have environmental corporations, we have lobbyists, we have special interests, and they put together a little package and they gave it to our representative who can barely find us on a map, who's taking almost all of it from Trinity County. And I don't want you to give them a "we don't like this" letter. I would like you to give them "we don't like this" letter, and you won't be taking any of this from Trinity County. for the same reason you had it removed from up around Trinity Center. We don't want it anywhere. We don't need more wilderness areas. We don't need more areas that when they catch on fire, you can't use a chainsaw or a helicopter without getting special permission while it burns. As far as our creeks go, I don't know about you guys, but I drink water. And I like to drink water that I have rights to and riparian rights to without them being taken by the government, because I don't have money to sue the government. I don't have tens of thousands of dollars to fight for what I already own. Our other problem is all you have to do is look at the California Constitution to see that Jerry Brown in his second term already turned our water into literally a franchise. And if you don't believe me, go read the 10th Amendment in the Constitution. Every drop of water we have is regulated. Why do we need to add it to the Wild and Scenic River Act, when if you read that act, it actually states that problems caused by including these in the act will be mitigated after they're included? What the bleep? They should be mitigated before. They should be brought up before. They're going to do it to us, and then they're going to tell us why it's great for us. They're going to ignore us, and they're going to pat us on the head. And this won't be the first time this has happened. Go look at so-called Claringle Lake. Look at the history of that. We should learn. We've been messed over by lawyers and such since the federal government took the Forest Reserve, and we just don't seem to learn our lesson. I'm glad you took out Bonanza King and the buffer area, but for the same reason you did that and more, there shouldn't be any of this. I mean, it reads like a special interests group in Trinity County. Jared Huffman knows nothing about this. When he gave a presentation on it, he couldn't point to anything on the map. And as far as the map goes, their new and improved map, it's simply a map, and you rest your cursor and you get a drop box. You move it a millimeter and you get a drop box. It's useless. You can't find stuff on it. You have to already know it's there. You can't print it. It's as useless as this entire thing, and it's as hidden as this is. And please just tell them no. Tell them no. Not we don't like it. Tell them no. Thank you.
Come on, more people. Let's go, Mike.
Good morning. My name is Mike Rourke. I'm currently a rancher in Hayport, New Title. House Resolution 6596, offered by Mr. Huffman, entered into the record. I would like to agree with what's been said about the map. I've yet to find one. I know there was a copy published in the paper that you can't find every little segment of the proposed wild and scenic rivers on it because some of them are so small. But I'm opposed to this bill and would urge the board to do everything in their power to see that it fails. And that's not taking no stance, that's taking a stance, an active stance for the people of Trinity County. This bill is way too big and attempts to be all things to too many groups instead of focusing on a few concerns. And I think that there are some concerns that we have in our county in terms of natural resource management and recreation in particular, and pot farms on national forests. All of these have been concerns around for one time, but there's nothing in this bill that's going to specifically address them or fund that. So we're going to create all this bureaucracy within our federal entities without any that are already having a hard time managing our forests with the goals that have been set out for them. This is going to complicate things and make things total chaos. I'm especially concerned about the creation of the South Fork of the Trinity/Mad River Special Restoration Area. I'm not sure what kind of an acronym that's going to create. 700,000 acres, most of Supervisor Finley's area down there, and in my area, and the South Fork Wilderness Area included on top of that, which is another 26,400 acres, and then the designation of the South Fork and its tributaries as wild and scenic/recreational rivers. This will directly affect our family's historic grazing allotment on the South Fork Mountain and other allotments in the proposed management areas. The language in the bill states that these allotments will be grandfathered in, and I had conversations in the language that they were trying to do beforehand. And grandfathering is not a fail-safe thing, particularly when you set up standards within the act itself that are totally against current operating standards and contrary to current operating standards within the Forest Service regarding grazing allotments and other recreational management. This will cause the end of our family's 6th-generation cattle enterprise, as our enterprise is dependent on the forage and the cattle's ability to access that forage, which is a bigger issue, that's available through our allotment. And one of those being the goal of continued decommissioning of unneeded and unauthorized roads.
I'm going to allow more time because we're in a workshop situation.
That flew by. These unnecessary or unneeded roads, which aren't defined, who defines what unneeded is. Unauthorized roads, we've been through this process before in that there's a bunch of roads that if I look at maps back from when I was in high school and before that had Forest Service numbers on them that magically became unauthorized, and the Forest Service's road management designation, that was their way of eliminating them for management purposes. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, Section 6A through 6C, allows for the condemnation of private lands within the proposed reaches of the public access, for public access and the ability to traverse these sections of designated property. I'm not sure that most residents of Trinity County are aware of that. That's of a big concern to me. And their ability to condemn properties is only limited by their ability to get access funds to do so. So maybe it won't actually happen because there's no funding in this. 300 miles, I believe, is overreaching. 10 new wilderness areas is overreaching. Focus on what we need. Throw this thing back at them and tell them, if you are concerned about helping us in Trinity County, Mr. Huffman, then come and sit down with us in Trinity County and ask what our major objectives are. Thank you.
Next.
Good morning, Larry Winter from Pine Palm. I have some maps I would like to share with you for an issue I'm going to discuss in just a second, if I can hand them out.
Yes, hand them to Tina, please.
So what I brought up wilderness areas in the past, but this time I'm going to just focus on the South Fork Mad River forestry work that they have in this bill. And I have some issues here that I hope that the board will be able to answer their constituents before they accept what this bill is. The first thing I want to bring up is that in the case of the Forest Service, this bill will mandate that they'll prioritize restoration of the restoration area over other non-emergency vegetation management projects on the Sixth River and the Shasta Trinity National Forests. And so I'm reading that the rest of Trinity County is out of luck. That anything that happens in that area will get top priority over the whole Shasta Trinity, the east side also. And so that, to me, is a red flag for you. For me, it's wonderful because I live in that area. But it's not right. We're now going to start looking at a master stewardship program that I hope we can incorporate the whole county so that priorities are based on need and safety. Another item which has been a controversial item in Trinity County for a decade at least, and here it's going to be mandated that for wildland fire practices, for the Forest Service when we have wildland fires, a priority for the secretary shall use prescribed burning and wildland fire to the extent practicable to achieve the purposes of this section. So that means they will now be able to manage wildfires in August to achieve their objectives. And so there's a big push nationally to start doing that. But we need to be, Shasta Trinity doesn't allow that right now. We need to be very careful on how that plays out. Right now, the way this is written, it would make it a law that they can do that, and we have no idea how that would be practiced. Okay, and then concerning the maps, and also concerning our ability to comment on this in the past, I have a copy of the bill as of June 14th that says that shaded fuel break projects will be a network of shaded fuel breaks in strategic locations within the wildland urban interface. Something that I commented on when Jeff came and presented this to me in a year and a half ago, how I like that. The new language, just since June 14th and when it's been put before Congress, on page 10, additional requirements, shaded fuel breaks. The Secretary shall prioritize the establishment of a network of shaded fuel breaks within the portions of the wildland urban interface that are within 150 feet of residences, private property, and then also along roadsides showing, the 150 feet on either side. And that has now made it one of the top priorities. And the reason why I gave you that map, the top map and the second page, the Pine Palm Fire Safe Council has been working. We're a collaborative group also. We've been working with the Forest Service. We've had this program, we've been on the program and worked for 5 years, and this is initial planning, so it's still going to be worked on. But we have 14,500 acres. The second page shows what it's broken down, the unit numbers. The third page is showing the first 48 project in Ruth, and that's a roadside shaded fuel break project. And I want you to see the difference of how much more comprehensive, integrated that the High and Pond project is going to be versus what a solely roadside shaded fuel break project, which is this bill is prioritizing. And it wasn't written this way for the public to comment on. It was just inserted into the bill when it was showing something different. And I want to, so I guess my main concern is that fire, well, this expresses it well. CWPP isn't mentioned once in this bill that I've found. And to me that says a lot. And it's such an important issue for people here in Trinity County.
For the record, could you tell us the acronym?
Community Wildfire Protection Plans. And also, roadside shaded fuel breaks is just a prescription, a tool you use to help the community become fire resilient. And they're prioritizing a tool as opposed to prioritizing what needs to be done, and then you use the tools where it fits and how the different tools can work together. You'll see we have broadcast burns. We have a bunch of different stuff in there. The broadcast burns are for take advantage of the 2015 fires where the fuel's been reduced. We hope we can get in there and keep the fuels down if we get there in time, which is critical. And another thing about the roadside shaded fuel break is that it stipulates a 300-foot wide path when we just approved the roadside shaded fuel break project in Xenia that's going to go to 600 feet based on the issues on ground. This is going to stay only 300 feet. And then the last thing, which I really don't get, and I hope you'll be able to figure it out, is that the multi-party monitoring, they'll use a multi-party monitoring, evaluation, and accountability process to assess the positive or negative ecological, social, and economic effects of restoration projects within the restoration area. And that group will be in collaboration with the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Interior, and interested persons. Now, who are these interested persons? And the power that they will have, besides just evaluating, is that they'll be able to incorporate the monitoring results into the management of the restoration area. And so this bill allows for using collaborative groups to help design a project, but it's instigating things from this bill saying these are your priorities. And then it also has another multi-party monitoring group that will say, we don't like what you've done, you need to change it. And to me, that's just taking more of our voice away from local communities.
Do you have the section number of the do you have in the bill where that's at?
On the multi-party,
Yeah.
it's at
That's okay, I can find it.
it's I under plantations, riparian, compliance.
Okay.
Right after stewardship contract, it's in there. It's like towards the end, just before the Redwood National State Park restoration.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Good morning, my name is Clarence Rose, and I'm very unfamiliar with standing at this lectern without a 3-minute limit, but I'll see if I can handle it. So I urge you to consider this bill dead on arrival. And my basic objection, and I have some other comments to make, but my basic objection is the same one I raised 2 years ago when several of us met in a local conference room with representatives of this bill. And I said to them at the time, and it's still absolutely true, that this is as asymmetric of a situation as a bill could set up in terms of the impact on us. So what do I mean by asymmetric? All that we need to do to create more wilderness, new areas and extensions of old ones, is to sign a piece of paper. And by virtue of that having been done, that becomes law, and those lands are withdrawn from the possibility of active forest management, and they're withdrawn from the possibility of more access being created that could help us with our wildfire problem. It's all gone with a stroke of a pen. Meanwhile, the forest management activities that are promised in this bill, we know from experience, it's a very long, tedious process that people invest a lot of time in, and when you get to the end of it, the forest management doesn't happen. So, as a modest proposal, I would suggest that if we do anything about this bill, we might say to the proponents, and I wish they would adopt this position, that you get the forest management work accomplished and then come back and ask us for more wilderness. I don't think that's an unreasonable approach. The way it stands now, the forest management measures, related activities are carrots, which are actually a mirage. They're carrots meant to entice us into buying into this bill so that the wilderness additions can be made without any substance behind the notion that this management is actually going to happen. And I want to talk about the collaborative for a minute because it has come up as a topic. And Mr. Chairman, you referenced that we had a workshop. My characterization would be different. We had a presentation in June from a proponent of the bill, and it was basically a presentation by an advocate. And I remember saying at that workshop, in a spirit of collaboration, where people have come together who oftentimes have radically different viewpoints, would have learned how to work together in the area where our viewpoints overlap. My suggestion was that the collaborative look at this bill, piece by piece, and any place in the bill where we could find consensus, we would indicate that. And any place where we could not find consensus, which is defined at the collaborative as 80% support, those areas where we could not find consensus, we would not deal with. So we would hand the bill back saying, these are the items that we agree about, that we have consensus, the rest of it we don't touch. I want to close by let me mention something about Larry Winter's comment on fire as a management tool. That concept came out a while back, and some astute people said, well, this is the government trying to use fire to manage vegetation without doing any NEPA. And it's absolutely true. Where else does the federal land manager have the chance to change the characteristic of a big area of land without any public review, any environmental review? That is it. I also want to comment, well, so we've made a big box in the Carr fire. And I'm as concerned about that as anybody else, but I have to say this. When you look at the Carr fire map, the operation maps, you see miles and miles and miles of constructed containment lines that were burnt right through. And finally the agency said, we've got to back away far enough and burn out enough that we can control this sucker. And so we need to think about fire as a management tool and the lack of NEPA when it happens. And we're in a real conundrum here, but this bill doesn't help us. In my opinion, this is a wilderness bill which is designed to attract support or be less unpalatable by proposing activities which would be good for the environment and the economy of Trinity County, but are not any more likely to take place as a result of this bill becoming law. Meanwhile, we will be burdened by a huge increase in acres lacking ground access or forest management, both of which are necessary to reduce and mitigate the effects of stand replacing, community threatening wildfire. Thank you.
I might have already answered this, Clarence. Speaking of the collaborative, I know it was a discussion. Everyone's been pretty frustrated with a certain side of the forest versus Six Rivers and Shasta Trinity.
That's true.
And we heard that Friday at the collaborative. Do you, and you might have already touched upon this, but do you get the sense that some of the restoration that is pointed out in this bill would kind of force that side of the Forest Service to actually get some stuff done that we've all been kind of frustrated about? Or do you, or not so much?
You know, I don't see legislation forcing the Forest Service to do anything beyond what they have been doing, and unit by unit. So some forests have taken a pro-collaboration, let's get some good work done out there, and other forests have taken a position that are, it appears to me, I'm biased of course, but it appears to me that they're trying to preserve their own institution, and that's their highest objective above all others. So I'm personally familiar with a situation where legislation was passed which was intended to cause the Forest Service to take a certain course of action, and we're 4 years down the road from that legislation, and we're still not through the process that they erected to deal with. So I don't have any more hope for this on a macro scale as I do for that on a small parcels basis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the board, I'm Tom Walls with Sierra Pacific Industries. First want to say we need to recognize that Congressman Huffman is a really smart guy, and he represents his constituents really well. And the constituents that I think he was focused on when he agreed to develop this proposal was his urban constituents, his environmental constituents, and those people that would be likely to continue voting for him while not costing him anything. And I think this bill is very smart on his part. Because really, if you think about it, you take this to Congress and you have all the East Coast congressmen saying, well, more wilderness in California, yeah, screw them. Let's put more wilderness in California. Let it burn more ground. So there's going to be a lot of support for it. I think this bill, it might not pass under this administration, but in change the House of Representatives in November, it has probably a pretty good chance of passing. And our president probably would sign it because it's going to hurt California, and he loves to hurt California. So I think there's a really, really good chance that this bill is going to pass. So this Board of Supervisors has an opportunity right now to say, okay, if the bill is going to pass, let it pass, but let's exclude everything in Trinity County. Have the bill go forward as it is, but just exclude any of the proposed activities in Trinity County. And I would think that would set the tone to say, our county is concerned. If you want to have a case-by-case analysis of each proposal under this congressional thing, then come to Trinity County. Let's sit down. We'll map each piece out, say what's the advantages, what's the disadvantages. But in the meantime, his proposal can go forward, and the East Coast congressional representatives can go ahead and screw California, and Del Norte and Mendocino and Lake County can take the hit, but I don't think Trinity County has to. So that would be my suggestion. When you have more workshops or whatever you might do, I would just say, Congressman, you are a very smart man. And his representative, I've talked to John. John's listened to a lot of our concerns, but it doesn't get to the point that Trinity County is going to be dramatically affected by this. I mean, every time you add more acres that are inaccessible or difficult to get to, you just have more summer months of a fire going that isn't going to be attempted to slow it down or back off or anything. We already have smoke in Trinity County for 2 months out of the year. We'll have it for 5 months out of the year, 6 months out of the year, because once something starts, there's no incentive in a unroaded or wilderness area to do anything about it other than let it burn until it gets to a road or a major access point where you can fight it. So I would think this is going to have major impacts on people's ability to breathe in Trinity County and our recreational. Who wants to come to a smoky county to sit on a lake covered in smoke? Ask our houseboats how many rentals they've lost over the past month with the car fire. So I think there's a lot of disincentive to have this bill for Trinity County. If you're supportive of the bill, and I think a lot of people in this county might be supportive of the bill, let's say, okay, we support it, but just take Trinity County, anything associated with Trinity County, out of it. That'd be my recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm John Driscoll with Congressman Jared Huffman's office. Apologize for getting here a little bit late, at multiple traffic stops along the way. I was hoping that I would be able to make a presentation today. I just found out about this item on the agenda yesterday, so wasn't able to put together something that could be comprehensive for your consideration here. And I guess that's what I would ask, is if the board is going to take a position on this bill, I'd really like to be able to come here and give an actual presentation on the genesis of the bill and how it developed, all the public comment that we did take, all the meetings that we had in the northern part of the district on that, and the comments that we took into consideration, the changes that we made, a number of which you're familiar with, of course. So we have tried to be extremely responsive to everybody in this in these discussions around this bill, and I just would ask that if you're going to take a position on the bill, you allow us to be able to come and make a presentation to the board, be able to answer your questions. I am here to answer whatever questions I can today, so if you do have questions for me, I'm happy to try to answer those, and if I can't right away, I'll get back to you for sure. So you can do that now, or you can call me up when you like.
I thank you very much for coming first, because you can see the constituents are very, very concerned. They have a lot of very serious questions, a lot of knowledge. I mean, Mr. Walsh just came up here. I've heard a lot of people here, Mr. Rose, a lot of people with very serious concerns, and they're going to bring them to us. And I think meeting or discussing this to us is one thing, but I think we need to do an open workshop for the county where you come in and explain this, because you can see each one of us is going to get bombarded. And I don't hear a lot of positives, I hear a lot of negatives. And for your ability to change people's views or minds or put things at rest or whatever, I think this is, you know, to this little room. I mean, I almost think you need to make this more available for the entire public, because I know they want to do workshops, and I don't know how you do that, but maybe you do an evening thing where people aren't at work. Maybe you come up for a couple hours at the Performing Arts Center or somewhere and do something. I don't know. It just seems like this is a really, really big issue. Fires have never been more affecting of this area. We've had 2 years here where the entire county is just destroyed by fire. We've had about 8 years of economic damage or maybe up to 10 from when the road was shut down at Buckhorn. And so there's just been this nonstop economic problem. And I just think that you've sat here a little bit and heard what we're listening to. I think it needs your addressing for sure.
Sure, and I think we can be happy to do that. Again, we did do public meetings last year on the issue, and we've been talking with people ever since then, meeting with different groups that had concerns over that. So this certainly is not happening in a vacuum. As a matter of fact, it's one of the more public processes that I've seen, and I guess that's what I'm calling for here. I guess is the ability to have one of the congressman's representatives come and actually make a presentation before the board before actually they take a position on it is what I would hope. So I'm all for that. Like I said, I just found out about this agenda item yesterday, so wasn't able to put that together overnight.
John?
I understand Congressman was in Ruth and Hayfork reviewing this or taking this in consideration recently?
We were there looking at the first 48 collaborative fuel break project. So,
okay, thank you. Keep in mind that Trinity County is made up of just a few communities, and they're not going to drive to Weaverville or even Hayfork to sit through a presentation. It's anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours to 3 hours one way. You might want to take that on and work it that way and reach out to constituents.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that suggestion for sure.
We haven't seen much of you here regarding this, and I guess that's why we haven't been that inclusive. I apologize to the board, but
so
that's it.
John, we will at some point ask you back to give you've already given presentations to the board in the past. So
I don't think directly to the board, but yeah.
I'm not sure if you're the one, but yes, we've had presentations. But the bill has changed and evolved, so we will do that. This basically is now we're in a kind of fact-finding part of this in the community. That's why you weren't asked to give a presentation at this time. But we will definitely take that into consideration before we do anything else.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
A couple questions have come up.
How about we let the rest of the public talk, and then we can bring John back up if there was questions that he's noted along the way he wants to answer.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jeff Morris, now Weaverville again, for the moment anyway. I think a lot of the speakers raised some great issues, and I think that not to speak for John or the congressman, but I think they're definitely, they want to hear those and they want to take those into consideration. A lot of the ideas in this were actually spawned from local folks within the region, some from Trinity County, some from other counties, obviously, since it's a multi-county proposal. The other note I would make is that similar to John not being aware of this meeting, I think you're also not seeing some folks here who may not follow the Board of Supervisors agenda from week to week. So there's fishing guides that support many of the measures here. There's local business owners. So I think deferring this to another session that's more well publicized, I think you'll probably get a larger breadth of input for those meetings. So I would support that for sure. Thank you.
Craig Horgan, live in Weaverville. I would encourage you to support this bill. As recently pointed out by many prominent economists during the Bears Ears National Monument controversy, long-term economic viability lies with outdoor recreation and ecotourism in particular. And getting to live in Trinity County is basically a gift from the rest of the taxpayers in California because our budget shortfalls. And letting a few local interests, people that raise beef, their interests, they don't, long-term economic viability, we want to, a rising tide lifts all ships, one or two beef concerns that are family legacies, it doesn't really matter in the broader scheme of things. I know that sounds harsh. Also, in terms of fire mitigation, many years now, during the fall and during the spring, there have been many control burns all around the Whiskeytown area, and it's still burned. And as pointed out by the gentleman, it required a new tactic where they pulled back and built bigger fire lines. To wit, access isn't really a concern with that new strategy, because if you're going to pull back, you'll be pulling back out of the wilderness where there already is established access. And you can do your burnouts from there, and it will meet the fire that's already in the wilderness. So it's really a moot point. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm Dee Sanders with Trinity River Lumber Company. So I'm here to represent the mill, but also myself. Certainly, this bill has been around, and Congressman Huffman has spent a lot of time trying to have us involved in this with John Driscoll and his staff and the Wilderness Society. We've had meetings back over the last year at the mill dealing with this particular bill. The Congressman and John was here recently and met with me in the office. Wasn't one of my finer days. Congressman pretty well got both barrels. But reality, it's asinine. If we watch what's happening across our state right now, and if you really want to go enjoy your wilderness, I suggest you go to the Snow Mountain Wilderness in the Mendocino Fire this fall and take a walk. It'll be really nice, because it burned here recently in the Mendocino Fire. Big chunk of it did. We're missing the whole point here. There's always ground out there that somebody wants to lock up. And certainly as a county, having 500,000 acres or what it is in wilderness at the current time, you can see how good our management's been of that in the last 30 years. Look at what our trail system is today to where it was 25 or 30 years ago. Essentially, the management was went downhill drastically, just like it has in the National Forest. Mike Work brought up the road systems, and we continue to eliminate these road systems. We continue to lose fire protection. Yes, we had controlled burns in Whiskeytown. I'm not going to get into that situation with the car fire. But a lot of the people that, yes, they're smart, but they just don't have it figured out on how to protect what God has given us here. If we'd have gotten aggressive with the car fire, it might have been a different outcome. But I'm going to leave that with you. So if you look at this bill and you look at wilderness, we have a lot of wilderness.
I challenge you as a board to send a letter of no support. I think you'll find very few pieces in this legislation that are proposed for wilderness that are, you know, just nothing other than, sure, there's some great pieces of ground out there. They do not come close to being what the Trinity Alps is at all. Some of them are just rock piles and hot and miserable because people want to lock them up. Some of them are great timber stands, and I'm not saying that we don't put them in wilderness so we can manage them, but the reality is, one of the questions the congressman asked me is, well, what's the difference? What do you think is going to happen? Because most of these are roadless areas. A big chunk of them are. I said, well, I don't think anything's going to happen. I think they'll remain roadless. So what's the difference if we put them in wilderness? The difference is we continue to lock ourselves out of any management decisions. So if you look at the management of our national forest in Trinity County, when President Clinton, swept the country with the ISLE decisions, and we created all the ISLE set-asides, he created an AMA and AFORC, an adaptive management area, and gave the Forest Service authority to try all kinds of new management schemes there. And have they done that? Zero. They have done nothing there since that decision was made. And how many years ago was that when Clinton was in office? A few. If you're going to do something, board, push the Forest Service into making some decisions and doing some work. Yes, we have issues on the west side of the Shasta Trinity. Basically, it's an accountability issue. And I don't want to get off on that, but the management that is proposed in this bill is nothing more than they have the capability of doing right now and currently. Same way with marijuana. If you want to get serious about things, go out there and do your job. We're not doing it. Forest Service isn't doing it because nobody holds them accountable. I really encourage you to send a letter of no support. Have your hearings if you want to have your hearings, but none of this makes any sense. We're in the middle of a disaster when it comes to forest management and wildfire. Yes, we have terrible conditions right now. And you get these type of conditions and you get the wrong wind and hot temperatures, anything's going to burn. Even well-managed ground. But without doing any management, we're guaranteed it's going to burn. We get the right conditions, we'll burn the whole county up. West Redding's a bomb waiting to go off for 20 years. Nobody would do anything about that. Was it national forest? No. But we've got the same conditions here, and we continue year after year after year, making it worse and worse. Whether it comes to microworks, cows grazing, we just continue to eliminate the things that helps vegetation management, and we're doing nothing. And in doing that, we could support a lot of jobs in our communities. So, just one quick point about this that really bugs me is they recommend in this bill to put a recreation office in the county here. And I think it's centered in Weaverville. I'm not sure. I challenge the congressman. You already have a National Forest District Ranger's office sitting here that's doing very little. Why in the world are you building another government office to employ more people and go out to the lake right now and so many people are recreating here? Just about zero. Cedar Stalk told me this morning they have one houseboat reserved for Labor Day. So you need to make some decisions, you need to move forward. You need to be aggressive. Thank you.
Members of the board, my name is Dick Morris. I live here in Weaverville. Few families in Trinity County have worked harder to support wilderness than ours in the establishment of the Trinity Alps Wilderness, which increased the Trinity Alps primitive area from 250,000 acres to nearly 500,000 acres. But you are being asked by way of the Huffman bill to accept adding an additional 260,000 acres to the 500,000 acres of our county already in wilderness. This legislation would commit nearly half of our entire county to wilderness designation. Sitting in your position, I would want every decision that impacts the economy of this county to be carefully and thoughtfully thought through. Since timber is the most valuable asset in our county, second possibly only to water, We deserve rock-hard, solid commitments in this bill, not vague assertions that our forests will once again be productive and contribute to a strong economy, rather than being locked up by the failed management of the last 20 years. If your important support for this bill is to be added, I urge you to support it only after you are certain that there's something in it for us. Thank you.
Jay Grossman, Chris Tayfork. Been seeing this kind of line of public speakers not on cannabis, I think, ever in this room. So I think it's really cool to see the community coming together and expressing, obviously, something they're really passionate about here. People from all sides of the county, all walks of life. You know, one of the things that I personally love about Trinity County, and I know that a lot of people love about Trinity County, and why a lot of us are drawn to live here, is kind of building your own destiny, making your own life, living in a place that you can live out how you want to, being in a small community where the community kind of dictates how we all live together. I think that every day that passes, every year that passes, we see more overreach from, you know, Southern California legislation, from the federal government's legislation. It's happening everywhere. It's not just here. I think that it's really important for us to look at, and I've obviously seen this in a tiny spectrum in my life compared to some of these ranchers and people who have been involved in the timber industry and have lived here for generations. But I think that it's really important that we look at very carefully giving away control, giving away options. You know, it's always better to have options, even if they're not all good options. You got options. I think that we need to look very carefully at giving away those options. I don't know a fraction of the stuff about this bill that probably everybody else in this room knows about, but I know in my short 31 years on this planet that putting my faith in the federal government or putting my faith in somebody that doesn't live in this valley or doesn't live in this county to manage our surroundings and really our life. I mean, people are losing lives in fires and whatnot. That's a scary proposition to make. Thanks.
All right, anybody else?
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Tom Belanco, Douglas City. I wanted to like this bill. I generally am in favor of wilderness areas. I love seeing headwaters included in one of the designations. That main grove deserves a wilderness designation. But I think the previous speakers have really brought out a lot of extraordinarily valid concerns. I would highlight particularly the gentleman from High Palm talking about local approaches to fire protection. We're at a crisis stage with the state of our forests. I think that's been reiterated numerous times. And some of the approaches are going to take some creativity while we get from where we are to where we need to be. Layering more regulation on top of what those creative approaches could entail is probably not the best way to stimulate bringing them about. So as far as the forestry aspects of the bill, I think we've really heard a lot that I agree with, and I do think a letter in opposition or a very long list of what we'd like to see changed is in order. But one thing I haven't heard so much about is the water aspects, and that is designating a huge swath of creeks as wild and scenic, river designation, and some extraordinarily short stretches, quarter mile. Again, in name, it makes sense. Oh, sure, we're going to protect these creeks, but I think Trinity County has a long history of involvement with the federal government in terms of our water management. And I don't think our track record is one that says, hey, we want more of this because it's going so good for us. Even it's these sections, you start, once they get these designations, you start getting into flow rate considerations and things that start impacting riparian rights and start impacting the way people live in this county. So I think it's asking too much, particularly of the county. I wish there were smaller changes that I could recommend, but I think it's really kind of a back to the drawing board type approach that I think. Anyway, I think that's the tone that you're getting. If we go forward, great. If we want to do more workshops, I think that's appropriate. But I certainly think at this point, the county is got to be in opposition to the bill. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Josh Bose. I live up in Coffee Creek. I originally came here because my wife to find out about the non-storefront thing that's happening. And then I started thinking about how many fires have there been up here since I've been here? And how worse has it gotten since I've been here? And I only come up with some very serious, being an environmentalist, things that we have to deal with that we're not fully dealing with. I mean, we can pass all the laws locally that we want to help with the fire control. But what we really should be doing is thinking about who we vote for in the presidential elections. We have a man in there that does not believe in global warming. Now, I can't think of anybody up there who would not now agree that we have a problem, far beyond the reaches of just locality. So I just want to ask everybody in here, for God's sake, to think about who you vote for, and more importantly, to vote. To not forget that that's our sacred right. A lot of people have died in battlefields because of that, of our right to vote, to have a say in what goes on federally and statewide. So anybody that you vote for, if they don't have to be a screaming environmentalist to see what's happening. If they don't question the person that they're voting for about that, about their environmental awareness, then you just might as well throw the whole thing down the toilet. Because until we have leaders that really believe we have a serious problem, nothing's going to happen that's going to be substantially satisfying for all of us. You know, we all want to make money. Yeah, I want to grow pot. I've got my county license. I've got my state license. But I can't grow anything if everything burns up. I put over $60,000 into my home because I knew this was going to happen. I've been hopefully not praying that it didn't happen, but it has happened, and it's not going to get any better. So please, whatever happens from this meeting, please, everyone vote in this room, and tell your friends to vote, and tell your friends to think about who they are voting for, and not just be partisan about this anymore. There's no room left in our history, our short future, to be partisan. And thank you for being here, and I appreciate every one of you for helping us get at least as far as we have got with the marijuana thing. And thank you for being there, that's all. And thank you for voting.
All right, anybody else?
Since this is a workshop-y thing, may I approach and speak real quickly?
You may try to keep it at 2 minutes.
It'll be very short. This Kay Graves from Lewiston. This pertains to if you have another meeting on this for public input and information. I'm requesting that you have the meeting in the format where the entire board is there, because not just the ad hoc committee, because the entire board needs as much information as they can get. And I would also like to request that Representative Huffman did not write this bill. This was given to him, and it was given to him by several sources. And I would like the people to be included in that meeting, the environmental corporations, the lobbyists, the people that are actually requested some of this to be placed, like the Weaverville Information Center, those people to come forward and present to the people why they think this is good for us. Also, it clarifies any potential conflicts of interest. And I think that's important for us to know, because obviously this bill came from somewhere, and we have the right to know who presented this and who's backing it. Thank you.
Since I gave Kay 2 minutes, I'll give anybody else 2 minutes. I see somebody chomping the bit.
Larry Winterheim. Just listening to comments, I just wanted to express my dismay when I first heard that they started working on this 5 years ago. That's about the same time we started on the Trinity Collaborative, where we had a professor from Humboldt State who specialized in collaborative-based resource management. The whole theory behind that is you get all these opposing views together and you work out, it was mentioned earlier, you work out what you all can agree on, and then you move forward with that. This is similar, this bill is similar to what the Forest Service has always done in the past, and one of the reasons why we formed a collaborative, because the way they've always operated, they presented a project and then asked for our opinion. And then we tell them what we think, and then they might put some alternatives up, which this didn't do, and then they decide what they want to do. Well, that's been frustrating for us here, because we wanted to be part of the design of the project. We even had people complaining about we were still not able to do that all the time with the Forest Service, and yet some of those same people helped design this project, this bill, that then just presented it to us and then asked for our opinion. And so when they say that there's a lot of stakeholders involved, a lot of people involved, it came, and from what I understand, after the bill was pretty much formulated, and then they asked everybody, what do you guys think? And to me, it was the same mindset as when a Forest Service project comes forward in the past. It's like, but the ability to be able to be a part of designing a project or a forestry bill is so important to becoming a successful bill, and that this method just kind of blew it away, didn't take it into account. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we will close the public hearing, or public portion of this. So I had a bunch of notes, but we took a lot of information that covered that. To the board, I would say there's other things that I found in here. Not only does grazing go away in the rehabilitation zone, but also mining claims are limited to just what's there, and then no new mining claims, not in the wilderness, but in the rehabilitation zone. So in a lot of ways, the rehabilitation zone is getting more restrictive and less economic. So something to look at. So, yes, John.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I've been waiting for you to finish, but I just wanted to let you know. Heads up here.
Well, okay. So I think it is appropriate for us to have another public meeting in a different part of the county on this. But my question for the board will be, do you want it to be ad hoc, or do you want to be at the whole board and have a special meeting? So I'm fine either way, but
well, I would like a whole board at least meeting here with, like, as John presented, so we can have a workshop and get some of these questions answered in more detail.
I think it's very important for us to gather all the information before we bring in the
Sure. I mean, I'm not saying not do a community meeting. I'm saying in addition to.
Because there's questions in here that I missed that people bring up, and I think it's important for us to gather more in the collaborative profile, where we find out what people want and need and see if we can bend that to this program or not bend that to this program, and then just say start over, or say but that's part of this that hasn't really been done real well. Bobby, you had a
whole.
Full board.
Okay. All right, with that, what's your motion?
I'd like to make a motion regarding HR 6596 for the Board of Supervisors to take a stance of no support pending additional public input.
Were we going to have John come back and address anything before we make a motion?
Well, we've made a motion, and I apologize for that, so if I will ask the person who made the motion.
What?
Are you willing to have John answer
Absolutely.
your questions, and so we'll hold your motion?
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, thank
And
you.
remember, you can second.
John, did you have any more input or answer questions that you want to answer at this time?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and thank you for pausing on your motion there. No, I think what I'm really hoping for is that you'd have another board session where we'd actually be able to come and make a presentation. And prior to that, whatever questions you may have, if you can get those to me, I can roll that into a presentation and make sure that we're covering a lot of the issues that we have. It's been informative here to hear people speak on their concerns, their specific concerns. Had a lot of notes taken on that, so I would be prepared to address that at another meeting in the future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yep.
All right. So back to your motion.
Absolutely. I'd like to make a motion regarding HR 6596 for the board to take a stance of no support pending additional input.
Do we have a second?
I haven't clarified that. I'm not understanding the motion. I'm sorry, John.
I think we need to second it before we can clarify.
I'll second it for a discussion.
Thank you. What do you need?
So we're not doing anything until
We're
not
taking a
us-
stance of no support pending additional input, which basically throws a sword down for those people who want to change our mind to present their side and to help us work toward supporting the bill or continuing with no support or just
I understand.
going.
Thank you for explaining. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Did everybody hear that one? Thank you.
so my question is to you, I understand that you're saying not to support it until further information, but what does that mean besides, do we write a letter to that effect, or we just say that we're not supporting until later?
Correct. Like the last one. Unless you'd like to write a letter, I can throw a letter in there.
I have subsequent. I would move to take no stand until we have our workshops and present it to the board again. There's a lot of questions I think can get vetted out and concerns. A lot of good stuff was raised today, and I would like to spend more time vetting those questions out.
What's the motion?
Just take a neutral stand until we are back to this discussion again, either both
What's
as a
the
community. No support. Not
Thank
no
you.
support. Neutral.
So my understanding is your motion is to remain neutral until further information, and that the board will follow up. Is that your motion?
Yeah, I think there's some great questions raised. I'd like
Okay,
to
well,
go in.
just make your motion, then we can discuss.
I second it, and I wanted to discuss a little bit.
Okay, so
about
now
that.
we have discussion.
Mr. Walsh pointed out something, and I was listening when Mr. Walsh said, I was listening when he spoke. Okay, there's a good chance this sucker could get passed. I think that they've been working very well. They took your concerns in when you brought them up before. I think a neutral stance while we go back to workshops, because they're obviously working, trying to take concerns, and we should let him have a chance to address concerns on how he deals with it and get the public involved, and then come back. So that's why I think neutral, just because Mr. Walls, what he said specifically is that we could get overridden in a big way here real easily in the end because of urban and all that other stuff, but they're working with us to shape this in our benefit as much as possible. We should at least let him have the opportunity to come back with, his ability to help fix some of the, or, address some of the consequences.
Okay.
And just because of what you said is exactly why we can take a stance for no support, because that throws the sword down, makes them work at working with us if they wish to change it, instead of just having them go, oh, okay, no problem, we'll come in and talk to everybody. I want them to prove themselves and to start working for us and with us.
I think you heard it from everybody, but
That's why I'm going no support. If no support represents a majority of the constituents out there, but it does offer Congressman Huffman the chance to start coming back and coming up with public input and working with us.
Well, I think going on, if I may, Chair, Supervisor.
John's done. Are you done, John?
Are you done?
I'm done, sure.
Okay.
I think as Supervisor Mines has pointed out, they have already shown some willingness to amend, adjust. They did so with some of Supervisor Grove's requests earlier, a couple months ago. So I'm not sure if we're quite there. Throwing the sword down, as you say, is quite the approach at the moment. I mean, it's not like they have not tried to work with some of our requests from board members. Just saying.
I mean, do you have any input? No. I will say either one I could go with, but I do tend to lean towards John that I think it's that we need to convey that we find serious problems as is today, and that we are willing to work and move forward on those, but there's no way that I could vote for it as is. And so this makes that very clear to the parties involved that we need to do some more work.
Well, why don't we, I can revise my motion to include a letter with some concerns for them to keep thinking about as we move through this process.
Well, the problem with John's not requesting a letter. It's just that our stance is at this time we can't support until we move forward. The problem is the letter has a time and a place, but that's after we do our vetting. I mean, I've got a list of 16 things here, and I have about another 5. So, and when I say a list, I mean it's like fix the fire problem. So it's not just like little.
No, I know.
So I think we need to vet this more publicly and the concerns, and then come up with specific things. And in fairness to them, we just can't say fix the water problem, fix the fire problem. We have to say these are the X amount of things that we move forward on. So the letter comes after we finish that process, it seems to me. So without any other discussion, we have a subsequent. Let's go ahead and do roll calls just for record. And the subsequent is to remain neutral until further work is done.
Supervisor Mines?
Aye.